and I'm very excited that everyone can join us this afternoon. I'm Suzanne Bontempo, part with the Our Water, Our World program in partnership with the Stormwater Alliance, here to talk to you about gardening in a changing climate. And in honor of Earth Day, I'm really excited to share this program with you to help us grow more resilient gardens during times of excessive weather.
Yeah.
I'm joined here with Emily from the Solano Stormwater Alliance and Elise from the Solano County Water Agency. And Emily, would you like to share a little bit about our partnership?
Yeah, thanks so much, Suzanne. I'm Lake Warwin. I'm a senior engineer at the Fairfield Sassoon Sewer District, and I manage the Solano Stormwater Alliance, which is a collaboration of the cities of Fairfield, Sassoon City, Vallejo, and the Vallejo Flood and Wastewater District. And what we all have in common is that we're big cities that drain all the rainfall that falls in those places drains to the San Francisco Bay. So we're very motivated to make sure that stormwater is as clean as possible before it reaches the bay. And one of the ways to do that is to be responsible and kind of doing our best in the gardens and the land that we manage. So that includes at the sewer district. And I'm going to take a moment I'll paste in the chat, but climate change is also something that we're working to be better prepared for and resilient in the future. And so I'll paste in the chat a couple links to a project we're working to envision at our wastewater treatment plant, a treatment wetland that would help us be more resilient to climate change in the future, especially around sea level rise. So would love to get your input on that project and participation in the future. So look forward to this program, and thanks so much to Suzanne for leading the way. And this recording, I'm sure she'll say this, but along with all of the previous webinars, boom, are available on our Fairfield Sassoon Sewer District website. So thanks, everybody.
Elise.
Hi, good morning. So my name is Elise. I am a water conservation specialist with the county. We work with very closely with the cities, like Fairfield. We are actually the wholesale water provider, meaning we provide all the water for all the raw water for all the 7 cities and agricultural districts in the county. We do work as well in flood control, invasive species prevention, conservation, and habitat restoration. So just like a little bit of background information, we'll keep it short and sweet. Our agency does do a lot of public outreach. We work with amazing partners like Fairfield Sassoon Sewer District and Suzanne Bontempo on these type of outreach events. So always try to check on our website. We also primarily offer water conservation and incentive programs. So if you are so inspired today, I'll go through just a few slides of some programs that we offer, but you can take a lot of great points from the webinar. And then if you feel like, you want to implement that in your own garden, check out our website. You might get a little bit of assistance in those. And just in case, just like what Suzanne Bontempo is going to talk about today, we do also offer some educational programming through a lot of our other partner agencies, which you can also find on our website, and some K through 12 education. Yeah. So just a quick little touch, it won't take very long, but these are just a few highlights. So primarily going to talk about gardening today in a changing climate. Some of these rebates can apply to that, especially landscape transformation. We do encourage people to, check their irrigation, and if they're inclined, they can take out your grass and you can replace it with climate-ready plants and landscaping. And then, for example, on the next slide, Susan. Thank you. We do have, this one might apply. We have climate ready tree rebates through our local nurseries. You can purchase a climate ready tree and you can get up to half the cost, up to $100. So this is a great way to kind of help create a resilient landscape in your home. But these are just a few other highlights. And then we can go to the next slide if you don't mind. So this is about it. If you're interested in any of our programs, you can take, a quick QR code or just call us. We're in the office Monday through Friday, but I'll also be on the webinar at the end if you have any questions. So thank you so much for giving me a moment just to introduce our programs.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to learn about those rebates. And yes, please take advantage of these rebates. They're amazing and they will definitely help us out in regards to growing healthy, resilient gardens and saving money and time. So I'm going to go through our slides for almost an hour, and then I will definitely leave time for questions at the end. However, if you've got any questions, please go ahead and add them to the Q&A. And any other comments can also be added to the chat. What I am going to be sharing this afternoon is first an introduction to the Our Water, Our World program, and then how climate change and weather affects the landscape and pest management. And then I'm going to share some tools and other resources for growing a more resilient garden, and then how to protect our plants from extreme weather conditions. So the Our Water, Our World program is a national award-winning clean water program. Our Water, Our World's goal is to bring awareness between the pesticides and water quality, explaining how the products we use around our home and garden can end up polluting our local waterways. So we partner with water pollution prevention agencies and retailers that sell pesticides, providing IPM or integrated pest management education to both the retailer and to the public around less toxic pest management. You can learn more about the Our Water, Our World program at ourwaterourworld.org. And watersheds are garden and water quality. And how is this all related? So watersheds drain any rainwater or snowmelt that isn't absorbed into the ground towards and into a stream, a creek, a river that flow to lakes, reservoirs, estuaries, marshes, bays, and then eventually to the ocean. In urban areas and around our gardens, all of that water that isn't absorbed into the ground runs off into the closest storm drain, and in some cases a seasonal creek, going without getting filtered or treated, taking with it any chemicals, pet waste, motor oil, debris, fertilizers, things like that, and whatever else is out there in the environment with it, causing some problems. So we provide education for less toxic pest management and how to grow healthy gardens in a way that won't pollute our waterways or our environment. And we teach integrated pest management principles. And a big part of pest management is keeping our gardens healthy. So IPM allows us to address the cause, to really look at what's going on and use science-based strategies to fix the problem or prevent that problem from happening again. Through the lens of integrated pest management, we look at our homes and gardens as a whole system. And when something seems to be an issue, or if there's a pest problem, we're going to actually take a closer look to see if those are not just symptoms of the problem and what is actually the problem. Proper identification is the key. And then once we would determine exactly what that problem is, there are some action steps in the IPM. Those are referred to as controls, cultural controls, which is bolstering and increasing the health of the environment, mechanical controls, which are the tools we use to manage the problem, biological controls, which are inviting living organisms to manage the pests. Chemical controls are, of course, the pesticides, which we'd always be using eco-friendly ones, and we'd always be using as a last resort when we've exercised all of the other actions. In this program that I've prepared for you, our focus is primarily going to be on cultural controls. So let's dive in. So here in California, we live in a Mediterranean climate that experiences rain throughout the winter months into the early spring, and then moving towards a fairly long, dry, hot summer, which is very normal for Solano County and most of California. And we can expect to have most of our precipitation really between December and March, but starting as early as October and really going to almost into May. However, during the past several years of extreme weather events, such as excessive heat with triple-digit temperatures over a period of a few days or even weeks in parts of the county that aren't accustomed to this, or extreme rain events such as atmospheric rivers that lead to flooding, are now normal and to be expected. Um, so I want to start by talking about how the heat, the hot part, since we're moving towards that part of the year. And I want to share a little bit about how plants react to heat. So during times of heat, plants have these pores on the leaf tissue called stomata. And to prevent moisture loss, they actually close those pores, or they close those stomata. Um, During this time, because the stomatas are closed, this is going to stop or slow the process of photosynthesis. So during this time, plants can look wilted when they are shutting down, so to speak. And if this period of stress lasts for too long, if the plants will the plants will begin to experience tip dieback or root dieback, stunted growth, leaf drop, yellowing leaves, uh, due to prolonged and intensive heat stresses that also inhibits plants' ability to photosynthesize. So note that plants can also look wilted though if they are overwatered. So before we jump ahead and if we see a plant that's wilted, even during the heat of summer, just check the soil and make sure that soil is dry and needs to be rehydrated. Uh, Oftentimes the soil can still be moist and that plant is just shutting down, trying to hold on to that moisture. And then watered stress plants can have symptoms that resemble diseases caused by plant pathogens. So in addition, plants affected by drought, they can be stressed, which leads these stressed plants more prone and susceptible to diseases. So what we want to be aware of is that the plant could just be water stressed, and that's it. Or because of its water stress, it is now going to have be open to pathogens that can infect that plant because it's not in its healthiest state. What we can see from excessive heat, some things I've already mentioned, would be leaf drop, tip dieback, but we can also see sun scald, which is sunburn on plants, or bark split and discoloration, among other things. And leaf damage by heat can mistakenly look like pest damage. So for instance, the sun scald or sunburn on the orchid leaf in the top right corner, that burnt tissue is eventually going to deteriorate and fall out, creating a hole in the leaf that could resemble snail or slug damage. So, something that happens during, the end of the summer, and then we're not really noticing it until the winter months, we might mistake it for something that it's not. If your plants do get sunburn or, that tip scorch, do not prune out the sun damage. We want to leave those leaves on it because it's actually protecting any leaves that are underneath it and the rest of that plant or tree. Other symptoms due to excessive heat could be mistaken for diseases that attack the plant's root and vascular systems like armillaria, root rot, and verticillium wilt. So keep that in mind as well. Common garden pests that thrive during hot, dry conditions. Many of us are familiar with the spider mites, the whiteflies, powdery mildew, and then for prolonged periods of stress, bark beetles and tree borers will enter the scene. So a good way, really monitoring for the pests is the best defense. We're going to take action as soon as when we first see these pests arrive. Placing sticky traps around the garden can help with the monitoring. And then for spider mites and whiteflies and powdery mildew, we really want to just gently prune to the plant to increase airflow. That will help quite a bit. Next, we're going to look at how our landscapes react during excessive rains. So during excessive rains, and when the soil is very soggy, we want to avoid walking on that soil. We want to avoid mowing or working on that wet soil because we can compact it. We also especially want to avoid parking a car or any equipment on that wet soil, because from personal experience, the car and the equipment can very well get stuck in that soil and we'll need assistance getting it out. Note areas of standing water during these periods so that when the area has dried out, we can install a drainage system like a French drain or something that's similar. We want to avoid fertilizing during times of rain, and really during the winter months, it's hard to say if any plant really would need fertilizing. It's not the best time of the year to feed, but mainly we want to avoid fertilizing because that fertilizer will most likely just move away with the water and not go where we wanted it to end up. We'd want to avoid applying pesticides when rain is in the forecast of 48 hours. It's important to allow those pesticides to dry thoroughly on the plant prior to a rain. So if we are applying that dormant application of a fungicide or horticultural oil, it's best to apply when there isn't any rain in the forecast for 48 hours because we really want that to dry on the plant before the rains start. And then we also want to avoid pruning during wet conditions unless extremely necessary, unless there's a limb that is going to threaten a structure, because this can lead to pathogens setting into that fresh tissue that's in the branch. We want to prune deciduous fruit trees and roses really when there is no rain in the forecast for a few days to allow those wounds to heal slightly. And then we want to make sure that any plants that might be in pots or containers around our home are not sitting in a saucer full of water. We really want to make sure that the soil can drain well, especially during times of rain. And then the pests that we commonly see during wet conditions are going to be slugs and snails. And I will share a snail board, which is a board that snails and slugs will hide under during the sunlight hours. They'll gather there and you can actually just scrape them off into some type of receptacle to get rid of them. Is going to be much more effective than applying snail baits such as Sluggo, which has the iron phosphate, because those will just melt and disintegrate during the next rain or during those wet times. Earwigs, ants, and cockroaches will try to come into your home because it's nice and dry. So we want to exclude them by adding caulk around cracks and crevices of windows and door frames, maybe installing weather stripping or a door sweep to prevent them from coming in. Weeds are certainly going to start to arrive as soon as the rains arrive. But as I shared, we want to avoid mowing when that soil is wet because we're just going to compact that soil, which is not going to be helpful. So we want to wait until the areas have dried out enough to walk on to mow or use those line trimmers. And then mushrooms will definitely start to show up. It's a sign, it can be a sign of healthy soil, but we also want to take note where those mushrooms are. If they're around a tree, we want to maybe take some pictures or a sample in a Ziploc and take it to your local UC Extension office to properly identify what's going on. But we can also simply remove those mushrooms by wearing gloves and toss them into the green waste bin if they are mushrooms that are not going to be causing any problems. Mosquitoes are also going to be an issue. They can populate very quickly. So we want to empty any pots or saucers or tarps or anywhere else on the property where water might be standing because we want to avoid mosquito breeding. And then because the environmental factors can cause what looks like a pest problem, it's very hard to distinguish the plant biotic factors from abiotic disorders. So a biotic factor are living or once living organisms within that ecosystem that can cause the damage. So for us gardeners, it's damage to plants caused by pests such as slugs and snails, earwigs, aphids, or fungal diseases like black spot rust, peach leaf curl, just to name a few. Unlike abiotic factors, which are referring to non-living physical and chemical elements within that ecosystem, such as the water, the light, the heat, cold, frost, wind, gas, and other chemicals or minerals and such. So those can also cause damage. So how do we distinguish if it is if the problem that we're seeing on the plant is from a pest, a living organism, or from a physical element such as the wind or frost or heat? We're going to first identify that plant, including its cultivar, and then we're going to examine the environmental conditions. Did we just have some hail? Was there some significant winds? Things like that. And then we're going to also note, are other plants in the area also affected? Plants that are of a different species or cultivar. Because if it's the same damage across multiple plants of different species, then for sure it most likely is going to be environmental. And then what are the symptoms over time? Was it just kind of a flash event, or are the symptoms increasing? So those are some things to keep in mind and how we would go about navigating, adjusting, or correcting the problems. All right, so I just talked a lot about what happens to our plants during extreme weather events. Now let's talk about how we can, or what we can do to protect them and make them more resilient to withstand any weather. So we want to start by building healthy soil, and then we want to support and nurture the life in that soil. We want to protect that soil around the root zone of our plants. We want to water deeply around that root zone to meet the needs of the plant as it grows. And we want to look at different tools available to maximize efficiency to protect those plants. We will include regionally appropriate plant material to add to our garden or replace as we need to. And then we'll do our best to support the ecology of the garden by inviting in living organisms like beneficial insects and pollinators. And then we're going to retain that rain, keep as much water on site and available for our gardens when possible. So step one is to build healthy soil. Healthy soil is full of life. It contains high levels of organic matter, which includes important living organisms. There's fungus and bacteria and invertebrates all moving through it. There is, with good healthy soil, there's also good water infiltration, which means water, rain, or irrigation that lands on the soil will be able to absorb fairly quickly and not pool uh, or flood. Uh, it's the high water holding capacity, which means that it holds water for a longer period of time. So your healthy soil is really more like a sponge. So you can imagine pouring water on a dry sponge. It might take a moment for it to absorb, but then it will hydrate and stay damp for a period of time, maybe even throughout the day or two. You know, the sponges are pretty good at that. So our healthy soil is going to do the same thing. That's what we want our soil to be like. We really want it to never be completely dried out. We want it to always stay a little bit slightly damp. We want it to, so that when it's slightly damp, it would be able to absorb water with more ease. If it dries out, that top layer of soil dries out, it's going to create a crust which will actually prevent water from infiltrating, and it will actually cause that water to run off. Healthy soil can act like a Brita filter, filtering out toxins, which is really cool. And the living organisms within the soil are going to assist with delivering nutrients and water to the plants when they need it. And when you have healthy soil, it doesn't require chemical fertilizers and reduces the needs for pesticides because you have healthier plants. So there's so many benefits. But just to emphasize the connection between soil health and water, It's really important, both in times of drought and during heavy rain, because we want our soil to be able to absorb that water quickly so it doesn't pool like in like this photo here. It doesn't run off into the street where it can pick up chemicals and debris, soil and mulch, and bring it into away from our yards and into the storm drain where it could actually clog it and flood it and cause other problems. So we want as much of the water from irrigation and rain to actually soak into our soil. So again, good soil structure means that we have good water infiltration, and that that water is soaking in and holding, and that soil is holding it in like a sponge for a long period of time. The best way to turn our soil into a sponge is with compost. So you can buy good quality compost from our local garden centers and hardware stores. You can make it yourself. But when we're adding compost to our soil, it's going to improve that soil structure, which holds more water. It also creates pore space so that there's air, and that when we have water, it's able to infiltrate with ease. And then when roots are growing, they're able to move and grow and expand with ease. So healthy compost-rich soil can actually be a climate solution, which draws down and sequesters carbon. It reduces use of chemical inputs made from fossil fuels. It builds resilience against drought and flood and protects our soil from erosion. We add compost because we want to increase that biology in the soil in the form of beneficial bacteria and fungi. As gardeners, we're not just growing plants, but we're growing our soil organisms, supporting the life in that soil. Plants cannot take up nutrients in the soil without this microbiology. Plants need the bacteria and the fungi to process the organic matter and make that organic matter and organic fertilizers. They're going to turn it into plant available, make it more plant available. So just like our gut microbiome that turns food we eat into nutrients that our body can absorb, the fungi is and the bacteria is doing the same for our plants. But in this illustration on the left, that mycorrhizal fungi is also important, uh, working like root extenders, holding on to that root zone and extending those roots out almost like a bottle brush, helping those roots now access nutrients and water from further out. So those are just a couple of the benefits that are so important when we are increasing the health of our soil. Other ways to add nutrients to the soil is by adding organic fertilizers. Compost is wonderful, but some plants need fertilizer too. And so it's important to feed with organics in the form of a dry fertilizer that gets added to the soil either at time of planting or around that root zone, maybe scratched into the top inch or so of soil, or as a liquid fertilizer that's diluted with water and then applied as a soil drench around that root zone. Organic fertilizers are derived from organic materials such as mushrooms and manures, kelp, fish, bone meal, blood meal, and so forth. They're actually ingredients that when we read the box, we know what they are. They make sense to us. They're not chemical names or anything that is maybe difficult to pronounce. So they're not derived from fossil fuels, and they will always contain lower NPK numbers. Benefits of organic fertilizers is that they contain the macro and the micronutrients. To be sure that you're getting something that's organic, there will be emblems or logos on the bag, such as OMRI or CDFA. These are logos that we can look for. But when we apply organic fertilizers to the garden, we're increasing the health of the soil and the plants. Okay. So I just want to talk a little bit about the differences, synthetic versus organic fertilizers, just to share when we feed our plants with synthetic fertilizers, we do need to feed more often according to that package. Whatever that package says, if we have to feed every 4 weeks, then we need to feed every 4 weeks. If we happen to miss feeding, that plant is going to become stressed. It's going to be starved, so to speak. It's going to get those hangries, if anyone gets hangry when they haven't had a meal, and it's going to make that plant a little bit more weak. Plants become dependent on the synthetic fertilizer, so we need to feed in accordance to the rate on the package. Synthetic fertilizers also stimulate rapid new growth, which invite pests, and these pests feed on that tender, sugary juices in that new growth. And then something else to keep in mind is that synthetic fertilizers are high in salts, which over time can be detrimental to the plants, especially if we're not watering deep enough, and especially if our soil isn't at its optimum health. So it can be really problematic. Whereas with organic fertilizers, we are feeding those microorganisms, as I just shared, and we're constantly nurturing the health of that soil. We're also going to prevent those growth spurts, and that plant is able to grow in a more natural rate and feed and get those nutrients on an as-need basis. Cover crops are also really important, especially for those of us that like to grow food. Soil does not like to be bare. It really wants to be covered, and it really likes things growing in it, because when things are growing in it, it's helping that whole ecosystem down below. It's helping that microbiology thrive. So bare soil is also exposed to heat, sun, and erosion and flooding. So to avoid all those things, we want to keep it covered. Cover crops are plants that are planted to cover and feed the soil rather than for the purpose of being harvested for food. They're great for those unused veggie beds or areas of the garden that are kind of in transition. We want to protect the soil from damage and erosion, especially when we get excessive winds and rains. It's also going to help slow the speed of water as it hits that soil. The cover crops feed the microbiology in the soil, keeping that system going, and replenishes the nitrogen in the soil. When they're in flower, they are feeding our beneficial insects and our pollinators, and they're also, they are improving that soil structure and improving that water holding capacity. So they just do a lot, and I feel like they get underutilized. One of my most favorite cover crops is going to be the fava beans. They're very easy, and they also provide us food. But mulch is also going to be really important, especially in the garden beds. We want to have that 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch protecting the soil around those root zones, to prevent that soil from being hydrophobic so that water can move into that soil. Mulch is also going to reduce the evaporation rate of that water significantly, which saves us time and money. We won't have to water as frequently. It also is going to regulate those soil temperatures, keeping those soil temperatures cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. We just want to avoid mulch adding anything that's like a dyed black mulch, because that's going to hold a lot of heat. Or keep in mind, if we do have gravel in the area, that is also going to hold heat and prevent that root zone from cooling down after a long day of hot sun. The mulch is also going to reduce soil compaction and erosion. And then there's so many other benefits, like preventing weed seeds from germinating, feeding the soil as it breaks down. And so a couple of things that I wanted to share about water. Water, as you know, I could talk about water for the whole day, actually. It's one of my most favorite topics, and it's something that I feel like it's very hard for many of us to understand because we don't see what's going on underneath the soil. But I have some tips and tricks for how to water, how long to water for, and how frequently we should be watering our plants. And the difference between hand watering and using an irrigation system. So you've seen our programs before, you know that it is really important to help our root systems of the plants grow. And we do that by watering. The roots are only going to go where the water goes. So we want to drive and grow deep root systems by watering deeply. And then as the plant grows, we want to expand where we focus the water out at the drip line. The drip line is the outer edges of the canopy of that plant. I know there's illustrations of trees here, but you can imagine that that's a tomato or a rose or a penstemon, whatever that we have in the garden. The difference will be a ground cover or something that grows with rhizomes. So we want to water deeply instead of shallowly. If we water shallowly, and the irrigation is set for 3 times a week, and we happen to have a heat wave, and that water now is going to evaporate out pretty quickly. And if that irrigation isn't scheduled to come on for another day or two, then that plant is going to be stressed. It's going to be dehydrated. And if this happens over time, then that plant is going to have a reduced life cycle, and it's going to show a lot of stress, and it's going to most likely have some be more attractive for pests and other things. So we always want to focus that water and get it at the drip line and water really deeply. And our goal as the plants are becoming established is to add more volume of water and then water less frequently. Once plants are established, we want to understand what those plant needs are. Is it something that requires no water once established, or does it need regular water once established? When we have a root system, depending on what the plant material is, we want to get that water down about 6 to 12 inches on established plants. So perennials might need water to get down about 6 inches or so, whereas larger trees and shrubs, we might want to water long enough so that water is getting down about 12 inches or so. And then we're not watering again until the top 3, 5, 6 or 7 inches is dry. And that's going to depend if we have a layer of mulch on top, we're going to, that mulch is going to hold that water in for even longer. And then trees are a priority during times of drought. They have a very large root system that is typically growing well beyond its canopy. So trees are important to really protect because they provide more services within our ecosystem. They sequester carbon and they provide shade, and they also are providing so much for the habitat, the birds, and so forth. So please consult with a licensed arborist to see if providing a deep soak once or twice or 3 times during the summer months is necessary and would be important. So that would be July, August, and September when we are at our longest daylight hours, are farthest away from the last time it rained, and typically during the highest temperatures of the year. So it's not all species of trees would need a deep watering during the summer months. But some of them would really benefit from it. So please consult with an ISA arborist. And then a couple notes about irrigation systems. For those of us that have irrigation systems, maybe we haven't even turned them on yet. So I haven't, although, gosh, it got hot this week. But when we turn them on, it's going to be really important that we flush the system and inspect that system for any clogs or leaks. It's not unusual for critters to chew on the end of the emitters, or spiders to make their home inside those emitters, which would then clog them. We want to adjust the controllers for our new season. It's not a set it and forget it system. And how we had it set for fall, and when we turned it off, or before we turned it off, will be different than how we would have it set up right now. The best time to water, of course, is going to be those sunrise hours between like maybe 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. We want to avoid evening watering because it's going to attract pests like slugs and snails and earwigs and other plant diseases like black spot and rust. And if we do have sprays or pop-ups or any type of other sprinkler systems, we want to take advantage of those rebates or convert pop-ups to drip whenever possible, because when we have drip irrigation, we're targeting that water at the root zone directly where we want it to be. We also want to take advantage of the rebates for the smart controllers. Those really help us water with a more efficient way without wasting water that's unnecessary. If we are using a drip system, we understand there's different types of emitters, even the sprays. If you have some sprays, this is also going to apply. The photo on the left is going to be a emitter coming off of a 1/4-inch spaghetti tubing that gets plugged into the larger 1/2-inch tubing that we call PE. This spaghetti tubing with the emitter can, get moved around to go at the edges, along a row of veggies or along a drip line of plants. The photo on the right is going to be that 1/2-inch PE tubing, and sometimes it comes with emitters in line that are spaced, 6 or 12 inches, sometimes 18 inches. The different emitters have different flow rates, and there is unfortunately no standard among the different brands. The most common is going to be 1 gallon per hour flow rate, but it's important to know how much water is coming out of coming out of those emitters or the sprayer. Because when we are setting the controller, the timer, we want to be able to provide the plants with the appropriate volume of water. So if I've got a 1/2-inch, if I've got a 1/2 gallon per hour versus a 1 hour versus a 2 gallon per hour emitter, if I don't know how much volume is coming out, it'll be really hard for me to understand how much water to deliver for how long period of time to set the clock. We absolutely want to avoid having any emitters at the base or the crown of the tree, because that is actually going to reduce the lifespan of that tree as well. And for those of us that are hand watering, we want to really imagine that we're watering much longer than we would expect. We want to, I could be out there hand watering for quite a while, and I think I've really gotten that water to infiltrate deeply, and lo and behold, I check that soil. Sometimes it isn't enough. So please get in the habit of checking the soil. If we've got our water system set up on irrigation or soaker hose or for hand watering, please understand you're the only one that can navigate and dictate how much water is getting delivered to your garden. You are the person that knows the best. You know your garden better than anyone else. And no one can tell you how long you need to water, because it depends. It depends on the soil medium. Some soil mediums, some planting mixes are a lot of peat or a lot of coir, which it takes time for that soil to hydrate. Or, maybe you've got a nice 2-inch layer of mulch, so we don't need to water as often. Or maybe you've got new plants planted, so they might need more frequent watering. Or, maybe you've got a certain mixture of microclimates that are impacting. So the point here is that we really want to water deeply and not water again until that soil has dried out, of course, in accordance with what the plant's needs are. But we want to avoid letting that soil dry out too much, because that soil can then become hydrophobic. So if we don't feel comfortable putting our fingers in that soil, then we can also work with moisture meters. And then some tools that can help protect our plants during times of heat, of course, would be a shade cloth. So shade cloths can be used to protect plants from the sun. I like to have it tented over a area like in this picture, but then also designed so I can roll them up and roll them back if I don't need that shade. But I do like to have it kind of in place for the season. And we're really looking at something that's going to be maybe 30 to 50%, which would be ideal for most plants. Horticultural paint, such as this paint by Ivy Organics, is going to be also very important for newly planted trees, young fruit trees. We're going to paint from the ground, the base of the plant, up to where the branches start. and that will protect from sunburn. We can also use latex paint that's mixed 50-50 with water. That's any light color that will also help to protect our plants. And then anti-transpirants are another product that I feel that are underutilized. But remember how I was talking about how during the heat of the day, the stomata on a plant, they're going to close up so they can lock in the moisture. Well, when we use these anti-transpirants, which are clear, waxy material, kind of like a lip balm, we're going to spray them over the plant. They last about a week. We're going to spray it on the leaves and so forth. And this is actually going to seal in that water, which prevents the evapotranspiration, which will allow those stomatas to stay open because the plant's not going to feel like it has to shut down to lock in moisture, and which will help that plant to continue to photosynthesize during these heat events. But these products also help to protect against frost. So really cool. And then we're going to talk a little bit briefly about the types of plants we'd want to choose. Of course, always choosing regionally appropriate plants, either California natives, which would favor the native wildlife, such as our native bees and so forth. But Mediterranean plants will also adapt to our climate as well, since we live in a Mediterranean climate. So we always want to pick plants that are going to thrive in our summer dry and winter wet climate. We are going to pick plants that are going to be perfect for our garden. So right plant, right place is the theme, and we want to do our homework. We want to match those plants to the condition of the garden so that they can be they can adapt and be less stressed and less susceptible to pest problems. But something I like to point out also is that it is very easy to go to a garden center and see a plant that's very attractive and just it's eye candy. We have to buy it. We just have to buy it. And even though that plant is this size when we're buying it, if we didn't read the label correctly, that little guy might grow to be very large and might overcrowd the garden. So make sure we're always matching the mature size of the plant to the space available. And we always want to group plants together as those plant needs are once established. And we can look at replacing our lawn. There's some rebates for that. There are native grasses that will resemble a turf, that will be less work, require less fertilizer, require less water, less resources, and will be minimal or no mowing. And then when they're in flower, of course, they're feeding the beneficials. But then there's also some lovely ground covers that are my favorites. My two favorites are going to be the Diamondia, which is the lower left, and then a creeping thyme. Both are going to have beautiful flowers. They're going to knit together really well and will require little to no water once established. And then, of course, we want to consider plants that support our complex food web that surrounds us. So please, when I mentioned considering more California native plants, this is what we are supporting. We want to invite our natural enemies, our beneficial insects, our predators, such as ladybugs that consume insects as food, our parasitic wasps that use the pest as a host, nursery for their young. The parasitic wasps are very, very tiny, usually about the size of a fungus gnat. We don't even notice them, but they are out there doing very amazing service for us. And then, of course, inviting our pollinators. So plants or flowers for beneficials are going to be flowers that look like a daisy or a sunflower, flowers like asters or erigeron, cosmos, and so forth, or flowers that grow in clusters of tiny flowers like yarrow, ceanothus, sweet alyssum, and even letting our herbs go to flower like parsley and cilantro. We will see so many pollinators buzzing around. It's really fun. And for those of us that like to grow food, growing heirloom varieties are going to be ideal for a California climate. Heirloom varieties are typically more drought tolerant. They have root systems that dive a little deeper and will require less water as they mature. So this means that they will really handle our dry, hot summers with a little bit more ease and will require less water. And then our last program that we did a couple months back was all about keeping water on site. So I invite you to review that, the recording. You can have a look at it, but in short, we want to keep as much water on site whenever possible. We want to, again, that nice campaign is slow it, spread it, sink it, store it. We want to slow the runoff. We want to spread it out across our garden. We want to allow that water to soak in. And then when possible, we want to store it for future use. There are so many ways to hold on to water. One way is simply just planting more trees and shrubs. Another way is installing a rain garden. We can, of course, install rain catchment systems, and then we can improve and replace pervious surfaces with impervious ones. But when we are holding on to water, the benefits are huge. We are leading to healthier landscapes. We are able to replenish that soil much deeper with that water. We are able to prevent floods and pollution. So there's a lot of benefits. Something to share is that when we have a rain event, when we have rain, 1 inch of rain over 1,000 square foot surface, which is like a medium-sized house, maybe small, medium, we can capture 600 gallons of water. And so that's really significant. So that's something that really inspires me. I personally have a daisy chain of rain barrels because, I love those big cisterns, but it's a big price to invest in straight away. So I slowly build up my system that it fits better for my needs and for my garden. But if there are so many different types of systems out there, large cisterns, or narrow ones that actually hold a lot of volume that can fit between a house. It's more designed for urban settings, or there are rain catchment systems that can go under a deck or a platform or underground. So I invite you to check out our previous webinar, or go online, or go to your local farm supply or irrigation supply. They will have a lot of resources for you. And then one of my favorite things is to create a rain garden, which is basically, you can think of as like a creek bed or a swale or a very, very, very shallow pond. In fact, it's just something, an area that's going to hold water. Water gets directed to it, maybe from the downspout or overflow from the rain barrel. And water will move through that area. It'll spread out, and then it'll slowly sink in. So it is not designed to hold or store water. So it is very, very shallow, usually just a few inches, and it's designed for that water to drain within hours, and definitely within 24 hours. But it's excellent to have one along the front of a line of trees or a hedge, or in close proximity to other shrubs and trees. And it really allows that water to get deeper down for those deeper down root zones. And then the best plants for the rain gardens, of course, would be some of our California natives that are going to thrive during the rainy, wet season and handle a long dry season. And, they're just beautiful. The California Pacific Coast iris, yarrow, our California fuchsias, and so forth. They're just beautiful. And then, as I mentioned, increasing pervious or permeable surfaces. So if we do have a hardscape project in mind, and we're redesigning the garden, or we're adding a new path, consider using something that is going to allow that water to move through it. So, such as decomposed granite or mulch or pea gravel, dry laid pavers, There's even going to be other materials out there that would be nicely suited for your project, but just anything that would allow that water to move through, because the root zones don't stop just because the border is there. The root zones will be underneath those paths as well. And so some online resources that we can offer, of course, the Our Water, Our World program has fact sheets that address some of the common pest problems in the home and in the garden. And then pest problems beyond that, since we do partner with the University of California, their statewide IPM program. UC IPM website is just a amazing searchable database that can provide you with a lot of information on different types of pests and diseases that affect plants in your garden, to how to navigate solving those problems, working with wildlife and preventing them from wreaking havoc on your properties and so forth. So check them out. And then if we do have any insects in the garden that we would like some help with identification, bugguide.net is one of my favorites. And then if we do have pesticides and we're curious about how the active ingredients are intended to be used, what are the maybe toxicity levels or any risks we might be curious about, the National Pesticide Information Center is my go-to. It is a very user-friendly site. And with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I would love to finish with your questions, and just let you know if questions come up later, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. I'm Suzanne at Plant Harmony, and my website is plantharmony.org.
Thank you, Suzanne. Wonderful information. So there are a couple questions, and there's in the Q&A, and particularly from Susan. There's some additional detail in her question that you could probably read later, but one of her questions is the soil called Gold Rush a compost soil I can add to my vegetable bed soil?
That is a great question. I'm not familiar specifically with Gold Rush, but the cool thing about when we purchase soil, the package that the soil is in or the compost is in will have ingredients. And I think it's a good rule of thumb to always read what are the ingredients and if that is going to be ingredients that I want to add to my food garden. Sometimes there are products out there that I will only add to my ornamental flower beds, and there's products that I will only add to my food beds. So yeah, that's a great question.
And kind of a tag on to that, is seaweed a good nutrient to add in addition to the organic fertilizers?
Oh, heck yeah. Seaweed or liquid seaweed, liquid seed kelp, they're all pretty much the same thing. It's one of the most beneficial things you can add to the soil, especially with transplants or anything that's stressed. Seaweed is, or kelp has enzymes in it that actually move through the vascular system that support the cells, really enhancing cell growth and growing healthier, stronger cells.
Great. And a question about black bark. Is it considered mulch? I actually had some mulch delivered today, and the next delivery was going to be a whole bunch of black mulch. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this.
Black bark. So there's mulch that we can purchase that is dyed black. It's just food coloring. You can also buy red dyed mulch. And those are typically like chipped pellets or chipped wood from other things, maybe trees or so forth. When we have arborists come, they will chip all that wood. But natural, when it's natural, I would say it's best. And then, of course, the red dye will not hold as much heat as the black dyed mulch, but black bark, I'm not sure if that is a natural product, if it's if that mulch was chipped and is actually black, or if the bark itself, which is the outer part of the tree, is then chipped, and if that is black, then I would say it would be fine, but my preference would be to use something that would be a little lighter in color, especially if I'm in an area that regularly gets triple digits, because again, we want to allow, 2 inches of mulch on top of the soil. 4 inches down, that soil is going to be 10 degrees cooler than the air temperatures during the summer months. But if I have that dark mulch, it's actually going to, attract the heat and insulate the heat, and the root zone will hold onto that heat longer, not cooling down naturally throughout the evening temperatures. We want the root zones to cool down at some point. So I'm not sure if
Great.
I really answered that correctly. I kind of
No,
went.
you did, I think. And just, yeah, recognizing it's at 1. Do you want to try and answer one more question from Susan? If you can comment on using rain downspout extensions attached to house gutters for capturing rain to drain into home gardens.
Absolutely. I mean, that is one way. The extensions definitely direct the water away from the foundation, which is what you absolutely want. And it can direct out to a garden, and that is getting the water into the ground. As long as that water is absorbing into the ground in an area that you find it would be valuable, then that's perfect.
Great. I didn't let you answer. If it's okay to ask now one more,
Yeah.
one just came in from Jan. I keep reading about banana water, soaking peels in water to water plants. And she says, any nutrient value, exclamation point. I don't know. Well, I have a question. Tell me more. Do you know what question mark is that have nutrient value that it adds to the soil?
There's a lot of DIY recipes out there on the social media sites that I think all should be taken with a very large grain of salt. And unless there's some science-based research backing that, I'm going to say don't waste your time or money. Uh, and in fact, a lot of the home remedies and cures that people are boasting about online, which I hear people trying without success when I'm working in stores, are actually quite shocking, and I could say, are going to cause more harm than good, and actually be physically cause some potentially health risks. So just buy the fertilizers, just buy the pesticides, please. If you're sensitive to organics, buy the ones that are registered for organic use. Read the label, make sure we're applying them properly. That goes for the organics fertilizers. Read the label, make sure we're applying it properly. Understand, if sourcing is an issue, understand where these products are being sourced. The vendors are out there working in the stores just like I am. Go to a vendor event, ask questions, go to their websites, ask questions, and yeah, it's always better to be safe than sorry.
Super. All right. Thank you so much. Good cautionary note there. Well, any other questions for Elise and the rebates that she mentioned at the beginning of the webinar?
Yeah, take advantage of the rebates. They're amazing.
All right, I don't see anything else coming in. So thanks so much to Suzanne again for sharing your wealth of information and knowledge with us, and to all of you for taking time out of your Friday. Enjoy the weekend. Great weekend to go out and plant.
Yes.
Weed, mulch. I know
Yes.
my list for the weekend. So hope everyone can do that. Please be in touch if you have any other questions or suggestions for future webinars. So.
Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Everyone have a really great afternoon. Enjoy your weekend.
Great. Bye.
Thank you.